Ela, you have a master's in Spanish language and literature and comparative literature. You've been in Mexico, in Madrid. You've become acquainted with various variants of the Spanish language, and you also translate Spanish and English. You've translated 30 books, mostly novels of South American writers. I shan't mention them all, including contemporary classics like Manuel Vilas and Carlos Suisse Zafón. You've also translated a dozen short stories. You've cooperated with magazines and festivals like the European Short Story Festival. You are a member of the Croatian Translators Association. I give you the floor.
Hi. I already been properly introduced, so we can go on the next slide. I would just say that my name is Ela Varošanec Krsnik, quite hard to pronounce to French speakers. So, I'm also, and this is important here, a member of the board of Croatian Literary Translator Association, and I'm its delegate to CEATL, where I participate in the work of AI task force and also authors' right group. So this is kind of parts of my credentials. So obviously you can see from that I'm not an academic or a tech expert, but I would say I know a few things about literary translation. I've been doing it for quite some time. So my perspective in this panel is going to be more practical, based on my own experience and experience of my colleagues, some of which are supported by scientific research. We already heard Antonio Toral about it. And also a good starting point for that was our wonderful counterpoint, issue 10, which was dedicated to AI in literary translation. I would absolutely encourage you to take your example when you're going out. So next slide, please. In this panel discussion, I will be guided by CEATL's AI statement and 3 core principles, which are no one left behind, no language left behind, and no book left behind. So nobody's going to be left behind, as you can see. CEATL is with you. No one left behind. This is our very important principle, where we believe that relationship between AI technology and literary translation should be that of ART. We borrowed that from our colleagues from European Writers' Council, or ART, which is authorization, remuneration, and transparency. In this context, we demand legal protection and stay united with our colleagues in this endeavors. Let's just not use the word fight. The second one is no language left behind. We know machines are not translators. They generate textual material, empowering language, and written culture as well. Therefore, we strongly believe and advocate that every language and every book should have human translator. Our third core principle is no book left behind, where we explain that literary translators translate text embedded in their cultural, historical, social, and all other context with empathy and emotion, and as we heard yesterday from Gospodinov. I would again say believe, but no, we know that machines cannot do that. To translate in this context, you need creativity. And literary translation is a creative act. And creativity is deeply human. We have a colleague who suggested to put that in Constitution, our right for creativity. I strongly agree with that as well. So we cannot be replaced by machines in that context. I would also like to emphasize here that our demands make no distinction between genre, target audiences, languages, or translators, because we hear a lot about, well, maybe this genre could be maybe children literature, maybe young adult. No, we believe that every book deserves a human translator. Also, with all this, our key points, let's go back to the main question. So, is AI in literary translation a useful tool or a false friend? I'll try to answer that from our point of view. First, a bit of disclaimer. This panel could give you impression that literary translators are against technology, that we are afraid of it. Or some might say that we are like old men shouting at the moon. We are already passé. I wouldn't agree with that. Lots of our colleagues do use technology on a daily basis, myself included, but we are advocating for its reasonable, sustainable, and responsible, sustainable, and fair use. That is very important for us. Our concerns lie primarily with AI's technology wide, mostly uncontrolled impact on our profession and society as a whole. So, as Damien Hansen, an expert in translation studies and computer science, said in his article in Counterpoint, the problem is not so much the tool itself, but its imposition on us as professionals and its use for purely economic gains. We as literary translators, unfortunately, cannot focus just on potential usefulness. Because we have to make a living. So that's why broader context and also already existing practices are something we have to think about. So next slide, please. There are some perceived benefits of AI technology, like we'll work faster, we'll be more accurate, it could give us creative support, we could use AI models like dictionaries, etc. While I'm not dwell in each one of those because of time frame, and we already hear something about it, I have to say that some of my colleagues, or most of my colleagues, remain skeptical if that is really beneficial for literary translation. And lots of scientific research supports us. Next slide, please. In our survey conducted by CEATL Working Conditions Working Group on October 2023, we found out that 54% of nearly 1,500 respondents report using AI translation tools by their own goodwill, and just less than 200 found it useful, which is around 10%. I think that's quite a small number. But then again, next slide, please. Even if the benefits were real, and even if they were greater, they absolutely wouldn't, in my belief, outweigh the issues we are already facing. And these issues I categorized in 3 areas per CEATL AI statement: legal, professional, and humanistic. I'll try to explain them briefly. We'll start with legal challenges, which we face both on the input, which is to say the data used for training AI models, and on output, which is to say post-editing and copyright in that sense. Currently, with our friends in AI Alliance, with EWC included, we are fighting for training data regulations with EU Parliament, and we invite each and one of you here and in your homes to join our efforts, because it's very important. We are on a crucial point, I believe. Because data input regulation is very important. Why? So let me explain briefly. Large language models require vast amount of data to train. And when I say vast amount of data, Gregor Stroj in his article for Counterpoint mentions that OpenAI's ChatGPT first version required 4.6 gigabyte. Second version, 40 gigabyte. Third version, 570 gigabytes, but from 45 terabytes of raw data. I mean, it's kind of when somebody says that he has $10 billion, and I'm like, that doesn't mean anything to me because it's such a big number. It's interesting also to know that on 4th version, we don't have any data because of corporational secret, they say. In this sense, fiction is especially useful because it consists of large coherent units and presents variety of styles. That's why after Rampage on internet, Facebook posts, etc., next battlefield is fiction and books in general, because they're very useful for training. Tech companies would like to convince us in this sense that us and general public and legislators, of course, that legal exceptions for copyright material apply here. We strongly oppose these claims, and there are many reasons, but let me give you two main reasons. First, the data needed for the AI, for effective training of AI model, the quantity is unprecedented, as you've heard. And second, and maybe even more important, the AI, generative AI, can generate texts, textual material that is going to be, or that is already, direct competition with us on the market. That is something that didn't happen before. So, and ironically, they're going to get to that on models trained on our work. So it's quite a paradox. There is a paradox there. So with all that, also recent interdisciplinary study presented in the EU Parliament by Tim Dornis, who is legal expert, and Sebastian Schrober, who is tech expert, concludes that AI training material, AI training indeed constitute a copyright infringement. So we have also a basis for our claims. So tech companies use our work to train machines for commercial purpose, which is to say for profit. And I believe, and I think most of you would agree, that it's only logical that we have an option here to opt out or to be compensated. Instead, data used for training is ambiguously presented and often quite obscured. So CEATL, together with EWC, calls for a 3W system to guide these transparency requirements for AI developers, providers, and deployers. And this system would ensure that we know what data was used, where it was collected, and when it was obtained. This is very important, this is crucial for us, so we can effectively exercise our author's right. We are also pushing for centralized licensing transparency system and a viable opt-out mechanisms, because the current opt-out mechanisms don't work in practice. Our second challenge is professional. Colleagues are increasingly asked to do post-edit of AI-generated texts for half or a third of their standard rates. We have interesting and brave example from Germany, where our colleague Janine Maltz was asked to do translation of Dutch trilogy for €5 per page. With post-editing, sorry, not translation, post-editing for €5 per page without a translator's name being mentioned afterwards. She made a very public thing from it, so we thank her for that. So normal rate in Germany, just to give you a picture, is around 17 or 18 euros, if I got that correctly. And also they're a country that have royalties. So she would lose not just in the process of translation or post-editing, but later on she would be without her copyright and couldn't get the royalties. This is a great example of translator being able to refuse to do post-edit. But the problem is, for most of us, our colleagues, we heard lots about precariat, that we cannot afford to turn down work. So what happens in practice is that a publisher tells you, and I've heard lots of colleagues talking about that, well, if you won't do it, I'll find somebody else will. Case in point is, for example, Harper & Collins president, who a few days ago in his interview for Vanguardia said that they're already using, that is one of the biggest publishing groups in the world, using AI for their second-class works, whatever that's supposed to mean, and they're planning to continue to do so on a bigger scale. So that's obviously a big financial blow for translators, which are already a sector with low fees. But on the other hand, it also undermines our professional integrity, quality, and value of literature as a whole. Next slide, please. The thing is that with post-editing also, that it's more time-consuming and exhausting. A lot of research and also experiences from our colleagues are showing that. And most of translators would rather choose to do standard translation than to work on a generated text. There are different problems there. Post-editing requires completely different skill set. It also leads to priming bias, fatigue, poor quality of text, and all that, of course, for less pay. Obviously, we are not pro post-editing. Our third challenge that we are facing are linguistic and language one, and this is something that refers to society as a whole, although the first two I would say also. I mean, AI leads, we believe, and there's some proof of that, to impoverishing of language, which is our main tool. Now, when I say impoverishing of language, destruction of language as such seems a bit abstract, so let me illustrate a bit. I believe that using AI for literary translation is like demolishing Notre Dame to make a state-of-art next generation building, or to burn Rembrandt or Picasso to replace it with the art print from AliExpress. That is what AI in literary translation do to text. AI-generated translation, we see, presents simplified language, and also it's simplified on a syntactic level. Because AI as its core, we heard a bit about it from Toral, is glorified word predictor. I'm saying it obviously simplifying things a bit. So solutions that are coming from AI models are solutions based on statistical word usage, which obviously is disaster in literary translation, but it also means that if post-editing becomes norm, less used words could disappear. So let's take example of two people slept together. Let's say that's a neutral form. But then we have had sex, made love, copulated, fornicated. I'm sure you can continue in your head. We are in a European Parliament after all. So in a few years, I'm afraid we'll be just having sex, or worst case scenario, not even that. No, joke aside. The most worrisome effect of use of the technology shows that AI technology colleagues report is obscuring their own sense of language. And after a few hours of doing a post-editing, I've heard colleagues who say, I can't speak Croatian anymore, or whatever language they're speaking. I'm not sure what is correct and what is not. This all sounds good, which is obviously disastrous for language. The effect is especially worrisome when it comes to literature, obviously, because in literature, language is used to subvert the norm. There are lots of layers of the language, and we strongly believe that a machine, or we know that machine cannot recognize all the layers of cultural and linguistic context, cultural references implicated in the language, and then again, empathy and emotions I'm not even going to mention. So with using them for the literary translation, I'm afraid that we are losing the core value of literature. So information might be still there, but everything that makes the information art is gone. And also, that is especially worrisome when we know, as Jürgen Boss mentioned yesterday, that some publishers think that AI is especially useful to translate young adult literature or children literature. And I think we really have to ask ourselves here if we want to raise the next generation of readers on a text, on the books, deprived of emotion and empathy, with simplified language, and then also what is actually the value of these books? Are they worth the paper they're printed on? I'm not sure. So to summarize, while AI might, and I believe that's still a big if, be of use to us, I'm not sure if that is what we want or indeed need. What we do know is that AI is already infringing on our rights as authors, threatening our incomes and professional standing, and negatively impacting the language. So to the main question, is AI our friend? Well, with a friend like that, who needs it?